Hey there. So I promised in December when I released version 0.4.4 that I would put out a video sometime in January of 2025 because it had been a while. Release 040 is the one treated in the first set of videos, and that was still beta. And now we're on a stable release, and at 044, I added finally the ability to manage printing of files on the virtual SD card, which had been long been an ambition of mine since I started this. Until we could print, I didn't feel like we had a fully functional interface. Now, when you walk up to your printer, if you have only convenient access to the stock display and not to clipper screen or mainsail on a machine nearby, at least now you can fully control loading up the filaments, changing the filaments, selecting what you want to print, making it print, stopping it, pausing it, canceling it, playing with it. You have the full functionality that you need in the moment at the printer. And with time, when I get this new release out, for instance, you'll have the ability to also manage your retraction speeds and distances. We will work towards giving you the ability to modify the filament presets from the console and so on. So bit by bit, I'm going to incrementally keep adding functionality. Now, this approach I took with videos at the beginning was just to take you on a cook's tour. I figured you knew what the buttons were for, and you just needed to know, how do I install this thing and what will I have access to if I flash it up. So I want to take an approach that's more scalable. I'm going to continue to release functionality on this firmware, and I don't want to do a full-blown end-to-end tour of the entire thing every time I come out with a new release. I want to be able to just incrementally describe the ability to do things with the machine. So I want to switch focus now more towards a workflow-driven description and discussion of the interface and the software. So the video I meant to give you in January of this year was to focus on new at 0.4.4. And new at that release is primarily, this is the ability to print. So I'm going to use 4.5 because that's what I have installed and because I haven't changed very much about the print. So I think you'll be able to follow along, and because I'm using 0.4.5 to do the demo, it will future-proof this particular video on how to print. The display in the middle of these file names here is intended to simulate a rolling control. I didn't use a rolling control from DWin. It was limited to numbers as best I could tell, and I wanted to use the actual file names. So if I find another way, I'll come back and decide whether to mechanize this differently. But the mechanics of it are such that you have two scroll buttons, an up and a down at the top of the screen here, right? And if we press the down, it moves down the list. So the list moves up in order for us to move down the list. Yeah? And if I press the up button, the list will move down so that I can move up the list. When I'm first hit this screen, registered, do refresh, I can set it back to where it was. It's showing me these files in order of most recent. So the most recent file is the one in the center, in the brightest text and the largest text, at the center of this spinning roller, if you can visualize. Above that is history, so the oldest files in the list are the two that you see there. The one just above the most recent is in fact the oldest. The one just above that at the top of the list is the second oldest. Below the brand newest is the second brand newest. So the most recent file is the one in the center. That's the one whose name is scrolling across the top. That's the one that's going to print if you push print. Below that is the second most recent print, and below that is the third most recent print. And if we scroll with the down arrow, we move down that list to older and older prints in order of their date they were uploaded. And if we press the up arrow right next to the print button there, that takes us up the list to the previous one. And if we go past the most recent, suddenly we're into the oldest one and then the second oldest one. You can only go up about 6 in the old ones and then it maxes out. It just wouldn't go anymore and it threw an error as well. So what I've done is make sure it doesn't throw an error. But you can't scroll into history more than 6 lines from the most recent. The text tends to get a little bit smaller as you move away. It gets dimmer as you move away from that middle line. I'm trying to give you that sense that you're looking at a roller where the names are rolling off towards the top and rolling off towards the bottom. May or may not work aesthetically. Looking for feedback if it really bothers people. Sometimes I find my human engineering skills are somewhat wanting. But that's the implementation, so that if you push the big print button now, it will go ahead and print the file whose name is scrolling across the top of the screen in green. That is the most recent print that I sent to this machine. Now, if you push print, I don't ask, are you sure? But if you push delete, that little trash can icon on the right, instead of print, I will ask, are you sure? So it's laborious to consciously and deliberately delete a series of files from here, but at least I've tried to prevent you from accidentally deleting something you didn't mean to. Now, sometimes don't think about pink elephants. You know, you're thinking to yourself, don't push the wrong button, don't push the wrong button. But why did I do that? So I wanted to protect you from yourself. But when it comes to printing, I figured you did that on purpose. It's a big fat button. So I have my filament loaded. I have run my bed mesh for PLA. I have a model here that was sliced for PLA on this printer. All I have to do now is push the big fat print button. The print start macro, knowing that I have cleaned my nozzle pristine, takes an initial homing simply because it needs to have homed all 3 axes or the printer gets all bitchy every time I try to do something. But I don't keep that value for reference for printing. I sort of toss that one away. I will supersede it with another homing just before I draw the purge line. And I do that to make sure that my nice clean nozzle is measuring the actual bed height with the temperature of with the bed at print temperature and the nozzle at print temperature. Everybody knows things get bigger when they get hotter. We tend to approximate stuff as, well, the nozzle doesn't really get a lot longer. But I did the math once and I honestly can't remember what the math was. I just remember going, well, in that case, I care. So I have changed my own macros. I've gone back from homing cold to homing at 145, where I am comfortably below drool temperatures with all of the filaments that I use. And I know I've cleaned the nozzle in advance, but now I can safely measure bed height with the nozzle just before I heat the nozzle to print temperature. Then I just go straight to purge line because I don't want to take, I know I have drool by then and I don't want to take the drool to the middle of the bed. So right now it has taken that bed up to temperature. It has tested the center. It's heated the nozzle. It's drawing the purge line. And then it's going to do a print. And we're happily printing our skirt. What you see on the printing menu, this is now the screen you will see while you're printing. It shows you the percent complete so far. That's being taken from M73 messages, M73 progress messages that I told my slicer to send with an add-in in Cura. It's part of the installation instructions, shows you how to do that. And if you don't have M73 messages in your file, this will simply show as 0. I have how much longer does the slicer think it's going to take to finish this print displayed here in minutes. So what you're seeing here is the time is counting down. How long have I been printing is counted, but there's two values here. There's one that says print time elapsed, and there's one that says total time elapsed, and that's because if I push pause and I say yes, pause, it will pause the print, and elapsed time total will keep counting, but print time elapsed will not, and slicer time remaining will not. So this is an attempt to help you separate out how long did I actually spend on this print job versus how much of that time was the printer actually printing. You're getting into your printer to change colors. If you're getting into it to fix problems, you're adding time to your job. If you're doing this professionally, maybe you're counting that time and you want to be able to make some kind of an adjustment to your invoicing. So this is, and maybe the rest of us just want to know how long did I spend on my hobby today. So that's what that's for. Now I can resume the print. Let's take a look at all three things at once here. If I resume my print, I say, yes, I did mean that, then it will come right back where it was before, right? The print is now resumed. And if I look at my screen up close, I can now see a difference between print time elapsed and a total time elapsed. And that's where that's what that's about. I can control whether the LED is on or off. It blinds my camera when I turn it on, but I can control that from here. I can actually enable and disable the filament runout sensor. So if I decide to heck with this, I don't care, or it's giving me some kind of grief, then I could disable it from here. These values show you last time I sampled the commands, this is the position to which the axis was being commanded. It's a long way of saying it's not an accurate reflection of where the nozzle's at right now. This screen is only refreshed every 2 seconds. You could see that from the timer here and probably guess. It's only refreshed every 2 seconds. Things that happen faster than that, you don't even see them reflected in these numbers. The one I find useful is Z because it shows me that's the layer height that I'm working at right now. I will also see M73 messages flash in here once in a while, and it'll tell me. And of course, there you go. Right, so it'll tell me what layer of how many layers and how much longer I think it's going to take. So if I wanted to tune, I can go to the tuning menu. I've pushed LED on off here as well because if I wanted to do my G-code offset, the camera won't like it, but my eyeball likes it a lot if I have a light to work by. So I need to turn my light on in order to baby step the Z offset value, and I'm just distracted by noticing my field has gone off center here, so I have to remember to fix that before I make the release, right? You'll be able to test whether I did or not. Firmware retraction is a whole nother menu. Had I been using retraction values, I could change the values here and they would affect the print. Could set, right, to, let's say, 0.7, because direct drive, you don't want particularly large retraction distances. And if, in fact, I've used firmware retraction with my model when I sliced it, that has now changed the actual behavior of the printer. I can return from here because I was very clever and I figured out how to go back to the page I came from and not just to the one page every time. That was tricky. And now I can come back to the print and carry on printing. If I really, 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 really wanted to, I have two ways of stopping this print. If it's an emergency, my printer caught fire, I suddenly have to stop it. I can hit that little break symbol up there and I will send an M112 code to the print's firmware and it will perform an emergency stop. I will then have to do a firmware reset to recover the display, and the button for that is at the bottom of the screen. If I push this other one, it just says stop. It'll say, are you sure? And I'll say, of course I am. And it will issue a cancel print command. Okay, so It's important to do it cleanly because cancel print actually takes care of switching screens and so on for me as well. The emergency isn't an emergency. Emergencies are for immediate shutdown. There's no "are you sure?" It leaves my nozzle sitting there on the print. I've just pooched my print. I could push firmware reset though to reset the firmware, and my printer will come back to me and be ready to do like it's never done it. It has no idea that we've actually left a print on there. That's for the operator to figure out. But at least I know I can stop things in times of an emergency. The one caution I'll give you is that Clipper sometimes gives you this nasty little alert that says, hey, I can't communicate with MCU. Something's gone horribly wrong. And in that scenario, this button wouldn't have worked either, because all of the communications between the screen and the host processor, where Clipper's actually running, are taking place across the serial interface between the display and the printer itself, and between the on the USB cable from the printer to the host, in my case, a Pi. So when that link is broken, the Pi doesn't hear you anymore. The Pi may well shut the system down because it's lost communications, but it won't necessarily stop your printer because it's lost communications, and it can't. Now, if rather than hit emergency stop, I had simply said cancel print or stop print, I would have been presented with this screen instead. It's the same screen you see when the print comes to a natural end. Progress will have been 100% by now. There'll be 0 minutes remaining. You'll have spent this much time printing, and total time of this much will have elapsed. The difference with pushing stop is actually there would have been more time remaining, and you were not at 100% when you pressed the stop button. But I haven't captured those nuances. I've just gone straight to the finished screen. One of the changes I made recently to the finished screen function was that now if you had set, say, feed rate to 150% instead of 100, throughout the print it would have worked at 150, but when you came to the end, previously I did not reset it for you. I left it at 150, and if you didn't notice, when you exited the screen, it remained at 150. Next time you came to, say, unload the filament, there'd be a screeching noise from the extruder as it oversped. So I've decided to protect me from myself, and you get the benefit or otherwise. What I do now is when it goes to the print finish screen, I set feed rate to 100% and flow rate to 100% again, regardless of what values they were. So at least now when I go to unload the filament, there's no screeching noise because of that. So thinking of that, if you pause your print and press tune and say change filament, do be mindful. If you hear a screeching noise, it's because your feed rate was set too high. Try to remember before you go to tune, if your feed rate is currently high, change it back to 100%, then go to tune, change your filaments, return to the printing screen, return your feed rate to the value you were using, and then resume. Okay? Have fun. And that's how it is. That's how you can print with DGUS-Reloaded for CR6 community on the release 0.4.4. It will still be there at 0.45. Very tiny differences between the two, a couple of labels, and how the time is being calculated for slicer estimated remaining time is being calculated. So I'm going to release 0.45 in the next few days. I will also start working on videos that show how you use the firmware retraction setting in real time to experimentally optimize the performance of your machine. I will continue to work on new ideas and new enhancements in an incremental build, incremental release kind of strategy. And I think I'll look at it for a while, but my heart says this is the way to do videos, not Cook's tours, more workflow oriented, feature oriented, very specific, trying to keep the timelines down. Have a good one, and we will chat soon. Bye bye.